Tonight we're documenting a guitar that takes nearly all of my Norlin era knowledge to explain how it could even exist. This is what I've dubbed the Les Paul Super Standard. That's not what Gibson called it, because we don't know what Gibson called this thing. That is a nickname that I've given to it based on all the models that it's playing off of. So sit back and relax as we uncover the mystery of this flamey beast. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I'd first purchased this guitar back in 2018. I can't remember where I got it from, unfortunately. It must have been eBay, because they purged their listings after 3 years, or maybe somebody emailed me about it. It was right around the time that I was getting into these super fancy Norlin era guitars, and this one just boggled my mind, so I had to purchase it. So what makes it special? Well, first off, it's a Les Paul Standard from 1979. That's pretty cool, but look, we've got a 2-piece flame maple top. In this era, 3-piece was the norm. So finding something like that, a little bit unusual. Next up, it has a legitimate post-mounted ABR1 bridge, which was just unheard of at this point in time. Because 1975 through 1983, you really just don't find that on Les Pauls. You'll notice we have some sort of a switch in between our knobs. We have flame maple on the back as well as on the edges of this thing, bound up to wazoo. It has a 5-piece figured maple neck, and it was built in the Kalamazoo plant with a giant volute, as they like to do in this late time period. This thing is a freaky beast, and the first time I owned it, I did not even have all the answers, but now I'm a little bit closer to the truth. My best explanation for this guitar at this point in time is it was most likely for the Winter NAMM Show of 1980. Because somebody contacted me and said, hey, I remember seeing that thing. And it was to show off the coil splitting, because you gotta remember, that was a brand new feature that Gibson unveiled in 1978 within their models of guitars on the 50th anniversary Les Paul. It had a coil splitter switch in a slightly different location, but due to that, they had to do this really large backplate. I'll give them 1 year to be like, yay, cool thing. Now we can do it on other guitars, and we don't have to have a giant back route out of it. But you'll notice the neck looks awfully familiar. A lot of the fancy Norlin era models got these 5-piece necks, but you could say the Super Standard took its neck off of this 2550 model. So that's some of its unique specs talked about. What about this body? Generally speaking, Les Pauls do not get flame maple backs and sides. This is incredibly special. A technique borrowed from the king of Les Pauls of the 70s, the Les Paul. So basically, it's a body of one of these guys, but instead of doing a rosewood binding with our caps at the top and bottom, they decided, hey, why don't we just make it out of regular plastic material? While you can find some the Les Pauls with serial numbers as late as early 1980, generally speaking, around 79 they start to wrap up the run, and some don't even have all the wooden parts at that point. And some of those runoffs got turned into super customs. Now this was the very first super custom made. You can check out that episode right here. It still has the wooden binding, but it's the only one like that. All the other ones just had regular binding on them. And Neil Schon made these popular, so eventually in 1984 they saw a re-release. But it certainly tells us that they were looking to use up the Les Paul parts in a unique way. Or at the very least, build upon that idea, since they sold just about as many as they think they could. Hence why I call this thing the Super Standard. Super Custom, by the way, is also a fan-given nickname. The real model is just called Les Paul Limited Edition, but good luck Googling that and finding what you want. Now, if you're curious which one came first, the Super Standard or Super Custom, I've got our answer right here. This one dates to the 208th day of 1979, and our first Super Custom is about 3 months later. So yeah, Super Standard came before the Super Customs. But next we need to demystify our headstock here. Typically standards do not come with a chalice headstock like a Gibson L5, or perhaps even the solid body version of that, the L5S. Those things have crazy thick binding. Maybe that was an inspiration. So if you ask me, a Super Standard is essentially the blending of the highest end solid body guitars of the time, just to make something brand new to show off at some sort of a trade show. But now I know what you're thinking. How can you prove that, Trogly? How do we know that there's this mythical trade show? Unfortunately, I don't have photographic proof, but over the years, I do have circumstantial evidence that seems to line up very well to me. But let's look at the serial number again. If you were to post just this photo on a Facebook group, I guarantee you 95% of the comments would say, fake, refinish, something like that. And that's before you even show an upside down Made in USA stamp than you normally see. These wonky hand-stamped serial numbers usually means it's some sort of a special guitar. And that comes from years of experience. You see a serial number that is wonky, you should always question it. But if it's within this era, it has a chance. Like, for example, check out this 1979 335S that I still have in my collection. Its serial is just a little bit weird, and it's got features that none of the other ones have, like the Heritage acoustic headstock. Here's another custom-ordered Les Paul recording model with a janky-looking number. That one had some freaky inlays. I'm not ready to show you guys that yet. However, just this year, a V Les Paul resurfaced. It has the exact same serial number as the super standard 72089, but instead of ending 027, it's 022. That one was built with a 2550s neck. It also had a coil split switch on it. My history with that particular model is a little bit complicated, but maybe one day I can be reunited with it. But after receiving that message of somebody vaguely remembering this guitar at a display show and linking those two serial numbers together, both having unusual coil splitting switches, that's where that theory came from. Just recently, an ES347 in a magnificent custom color showed up, and it's got the same janky serial number 72089 ending in 15. If you're watching this video in the future, just look up Trogly ES347. You'll find a video for it, because I bought that thing when I saw it on Reverb. But the thing about the 347 model is it also has coil splitting abilities. Now, whether all the NAMM Show guitars that year were going to have that or not, time will tell as we track these guitars with the serial numbers dating them to July 27th. Now, with the July 79 serial number, you might be like, hey, why was that not Summer NAMM Show? For that year, the Summer NAMM Show was June 9th through 12th, so this post dates this, and you know if they're going to build all these fancy guitars, they need a little bit of lead work for the January 18th through 20th Winter NAMM Show in 1980. I have a sneaking suspicion that this red Les Paul standard with the two-piece flame top and baritone might have been part of the same NAMM Show, and just some additional evidence. Here's a custom-ordered 3-pickup lefty Les Paul custom that has a serial number that's a little bit too close together, and then another strange semi-hollow guitar with another one of those hand-stamped serials, just for some further evidence. Well, what a cool bunch of guitars here. I'm dumbfounded I have them as well. That's just what years of guitar hunting nets you, I guess. And we get to document them on this little fun show. So let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench. It's in desperate need of a nice shine up. And then we can see if there's anything else that we missed about this. Let's just say the Super Standard has never looked this good before. I finally got all that gunk off of it. It was kind of a dirty guitar, but when I was still kind of confused about this guitar, I wanted to leave it as it was until I knew all the answers. And at this point, I'm pretty confident about the history of this one. We just gotta wait for more of these pieces to show up as we talked about earlier. But let's check out our pickups here. The earliest set of coil splittable pickups is this guy, the Series 7 Tarback. When Gibson first started this style of pickup, they would actually run 2 leads out of them. One lead goes to your pot like normal, and then the other one goes to the switch, so you can go between those two. So if we come over here, it looks like the full coil mode is 8.28 in our bridge, but then the split actually takes it to 4. But then if we go to the neck, it's 4.19, full mode 8.37. And then just for fun, our middle position, regular mode 4.16, and 212. These might be experimental pickups. I remember when I first played this guitar back in 2018, I thought it sounded like trash. I'll have to do a little bit more digging this time during the playing demo now that I'm a little bit more experienced. But the whole thing to know about these is it's very common for coils to die within them. But when that happens, the coil split ceases to function. You don't just get half readings like this. As far as our neck pickup cavity, it doesn't have a long neck tenon or anything crazy like that. But aha, it does have the hidden pancake layer between the maple top and mahogany body. We're not talking about the one visible here. We're talking about the one right under there that most people don't know about. But all looks peachy in here. Unfortunately, no NAMM Show markings or anything. Here's another nice side profile shot just for fun. And a closer look at the backside of these pickups. And the double lead coming out. Now, unfortunately, the gold is not in very good condition on this guitar. I imagine it was stored somewhere with salt water in the air. You can see it really affected the neck pickup. I was able to clean some of the corrosion off. However, the bridge pickup wasn't affected as much. It just has a lot more pitting to it. But here's kind of a big deal for this one. Read it and weep, a real ABR1. Because that's one of the features of like a prehistoric. This is like around the time that the Strings and Things reissues were being made. Well before 1983 in the prehistorics. But you can see your Gibson branding here. This is what like a Flying V of the era would have, just not gold. But before we look at our TP6 tailpiece, if you look around it, you can see the Sustain sisters. You can identify them because they have these rubber grommets around them. And if you know to look for it, you can actually see like a discolored ring around it due to that rubber grommet. It's very subtle on a guitar like this, but if you look at like a natural 2550, you'll notice it right away. But the TP6 has similar pitting to the gold, but it is an era-correct one, made in USA, Gibson. It's a Rendell Wall creation. As far as the condition of the top, there are a few minor impressions and scratches. Overall, though, the guitar is in pretty nice shape, but the flame top finally has come to life on this one. And I just love the iced tea hue on this, because nowadays you can find reissues in a similar finish to this, but you gotta remember, this is the time period when clown-bursted standards reigned supreme. So to find something kind of washed out honey vibes like this, it's just crazy. And certainly is tempting just to leave the pickguard off of this one, because that's got some good flame under there too. As far as the pickguard, nothing too much to look at here. It's got some wear to it, and you can see some similar frosting to the gold that I cleaned a little bit on the outside there. But these are vintage golden speed knobs. They've got some age to them. And here's a look at our mini toggle switch. This is very similar to what was used on the Les Paul Artist model. They just had 3 of them down here. But we can take a second to appreciate our side, and then on the back we'll take a look at the other one. But the way the Supers and the Les Pauls are constructed, they got the maple top, we just saw that, but it's not a maple body. They still have the mahogany core to it. They just surround it like an ES335 with a laminate edge. It's usually about 1/8 of an inch thick. Then they do the same thing on the back. Now, maple body Les Pauls do exist, but generally you're talking the 2000s at that time. Or you could check out this freak from 1972, the Les Paul Stereo. But moving on from our body, we've got that 5-piece maple neck. I believe this is an ebony fretboard, so not true to Les Paul standard spec necessarily. They just borrowed the inlays for it and took it from like the 2550 or whatever. But here's another unusual thing about this one. Look at how tiny the fret nibs are. That's almost like how they actually were in the 50s. However, as you go over it with a fine-tooth comb, you're going to see quite a few of the fret nibs have actually chipped off over the years. Now that could be because someone was working on this guitar. However, I guess it's possible it was refretted at one point in time. But there are a few of them that are a little bit sharp. And overall, I feel these frets are a little bit taller than you usually find. But you gotta remember, weird, crazy guitars, they could put whatever they wanted on them. But we've got the cool abalone trapezoid inlays, very similar to what you'd find on a the Les Paul. Lots of eye formations and what they were using at that time. So that matches up perfectly like with what you'd see on the Steve Howe TLP. After conditioning the board, those came to life a little bit too. But our nut measure is 1.69 inches, increases to 2.07 at the 12th. First fret neck depth 0.88, and increases to 0.99 by the 12th. It's definitely a slimmer neck, but it's got a nice roundedness to it. Not a whole lot of shoulder. The shoulders scoop away rather quickly. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. You can see how the shoulders slope away really quickly, and then you just have a pretty uniform C shape after that. It's a rather small feeling neck as far as the width goes. And the side markers are indeed tortoiseshell. You just got to really get a light on it to see the redness. That's nice to have this one with the ultra shiny frets again. So now our headstock. Here was another fun little surprise polishing it up. That Gibson logo just has so much color within it. Lots of greens and purples and blues. I especially want to capture the eye in Gibson. It turns purple at most angles. And our chalice has some good color too. I really like the abalone that Gibson used in the 70s. It's not as crazy as the abalone as they get today. It just has like a little bit more character than typical mother of pearl. As far as our truss rod, everything's good in there. You can see your maple neck. And yeah, they just put a regular standard truss rod cover on it. I wish they would have did a brass one and had a brass nut, but no dice. Looks like they went for like a 50s vintage nylon style. There we go, all strung up. Now that I have fresh strings on it, the saddle's the way they're supposed to go, I think I'm going to decide that something something was worked on these frets at some point in time, because the low E string's really buzzy regardless of how high you make the action, so I think there's like a light leveling thing that needs to be there. The rest of the guitar plays phenomenally, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. We're gonna easily be able to get a demo out of it. I just thought I'd bring it up in case, 30 years in the future this gets sold on. But the back is where this gets really interesting. So if we get it in unflattering light, you can see there's a couple light impressions on the back. This is far from a mint condition guitar, but still in very clean shape for its age. Check out our control cavity. Opening this up for the first time was always like, okay, what's going on here? We don't have our normal shielding plate on the bottom or the tin that encapsulates it. We actually do have a traditional ground wire that for whatever reason seems to just lead to here. But it doesn't have any shielding tin back there, so I'm not sure how that works. But what's really fascinating to me is you see how the pot has the legs over here and they're like on their own board part? The pots over here, they actually slightly routed out the wood to make those fit. But the solder joints on everything looks good to me. Like this looks like how they would normally do it. We only have one readable pot code that dates it to the 48th week of 1976. We just can't quite make out on that one. These blue capacitors are kind of cool. Reminds me of the brown ones that they used in the early 70s. But if you're curious how thick the back is on this, you can actually see where it ends right here. So it stops about right here just as they shelf it down. Here's an easier spot to see where that ends. And the toggle switch, it has that regular the Les Paul style overly routed circle backplate. Everything else looks to be about the same. If you're curious what I meant by over routed, they actually make it just slightly larger. That way they can round the edges in. That's just something you find on these maple-backed ones. But no wooden parts back here, just your regular plastic brown ones. And check it out, we got thick binding in the cutaway. Extra thick with our cutaway cap. The reason for that is they don't have to bend one piece all those extreme angles of a Les Paul. They can just take a piece from here, bend it there, and then make a new one for this cutaway area. Over here we have some lacquer shrinkage around the neck join. The other side's good, so you don't have to worry about the neck being off of it. I've always liked the neck on this one. It's got some good movement to it. Like, it doesn't photograph as crazily as some of them, but the movement's where it's at for me. And good old late 70s Gibson Kalamazoo. They always went crazy with these volutes. But it seems to have done its job at some point. There's a small ding right here, but no breaks, cracks, or repairs. And our Gibson M6 Schaller tuners have held up well and polished up nicely. I might be wondering, if they go through all this to create such a beautiful custom guitar, why don't they take the time to stamp the serial number nicer? My theory is maybe they did it on purpose. Because the normal production guitars, they just have a serial number system in it. It all stamps at the same time. These are hand done number by number, and that still occasionally happens yet today. But rather than perfectly space them out, I wonder if they did that as a way to signify, oh yeah, that's a special guitar within the lineup. But if they're manually doing the Made in USA stamp, that's how you can explain why this is technically upside down. And a lot of times with these, they'll break the Kalamazoo rule and not have it diagonally. They'll have it horizontally right underneath it. So with every rule, there's exceptions. And just because you find a wonky serial number, be skeptical, please. For every special NAMM guitar, there's probably about 100 Fugazis out there, or Ed Roman remakes, where just because you have a special guitar doesn't mean it. If you want to see a really cool potential Ed Roman guitar, check out my The V. But condition-wise, we also have a little ding right here. So that's the guts of the Super Standard. But how much does it weigh? Not too bad, all things considered. 10 pounds, 0.6 ounces. But let's go ahead, plug this one in, and hear how these pickups sound. I figured out why I didn't like this guitar when I first owned it. It's because these pickups, that's the full humbucking mode, by the way. It sounds like they were more so stylized for country licks. Needless to say, these are not your regular humbucker of the era. That's not to say that they don't have a particular tone to them, but if you're trying to play like classic rock stuff, probably not going to enjoy it that much. The tones do remind me of a Les Paul artist on some of their more squirrely settings. I'm curious, if we play with our other knobs, can we get more traditional tones? Kind of have that slight active punch to it, but you can tame it a bit from this. So there we go, the 1979 Super Standard, back in my collection and redocumented properly this time. Overall, I'm glad I got it back, mainly because it's part of the Super Collection. I'm at the point in my life where it makes sense to hold back the ones that make me the happiest. But I'm glad I gave this one another chance in general, you know, have some fresh eyes to look over it, and I have a little bit more history to kind of help explain many of the anomalies on this particular one. And this time with fresh strings and much shinier frets, it was a lot easier to play, and I was a little bit more open-minded to try to see what exactly is going on with these pickups. I think this was meant to be a country western style Les Paul, and these are like prototype pickups. Now there's a possibility I'm wrong, and these pickups are dying in a different way than they usually do, where just one coil goes out. But I don't know, something in me says these were designed to sound a little bit different. It was a show off to see if people would be interested in them. So I'll have to check that V Les Paul and continue to document the wonky 72089 serials that show up. If you're interested in being the next owner of this one, no, I just told you, it's part of my collection. But thank you for watching the video. It is a beautiful, magnificent piece now. Actually, you know what? I got one more thing I want to touch upon. The case for this guitar. It's got that really nice marigold yellow interior, similar to what you'd find in like the late 60s, sometimes even before that on like the SGs. However, what's freaky is it's definitely a late 70s case, so this was definitely special made for these particular guitars. And yeah, it's much more shiny now. But alright, troglodytes, thank you for tuning in. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.